Okay, we are really moving. Let's take a look at the overview here just to see where we're at. So with self-maintenance, regular 14-day unit, we're almost done. Then there's a shorter, lower stakes unit that, as I indicated here, began at the start of the course, if you wished. It's sort of a culmination, and it's an attempt to provide a closure experience, if you will. Counts as your final exam. There's no final exam otherwise. There is a brief exam here, 25 points. The Omega Project, very different format than anything else you've done. It's really up to you. You could use the same format as before or something entirely different. Spread your wings opportunity, you might call it, and it's 25 points as well. So this is a lower stakes unit, as you can see here. But now we are in the self-maintenance section. Just looking ahead there, the usual two exams, one on the step, the last major step in the self-study, self-maintenance, and then a focus area, the fourth focus area, which is careers and jobs, and getting them and keeping them or evolving them. And there's self-maintenance exercises as well. So let's see if I can actually make it back. Pressing the back arrow here. All right. Scrolling down here. Here we go. So we have self-maintenance, some mini lectures, focus area on jobs and careers, the project, I do a separate video on that, the exercises, and then as a final continuation of your self-study, the fourth step, the fourth unit, and then the totally optional discussion area. So let's do everything but the project, just delve into a bit. So clicking on these, I always encourage you to go through in the order I provided because that's what I thought would be best. Of course, you can always bop around if you wish. So this is a reminder to keep collecting self-monitoring data as well as a quick tour of the unit. You see how my sound's adjusted. That's pretty good. And then here's advice on the exercises on the project itself. Try to keep that separate. Moving here, we have readings, including a chapter from one of the self-management texts I wrote, available in PDF and iBook format, and then a separate little article providing an alternative model for relapse, based, I think, more on substance use recovery, 11 phases rather than the much smaller number in the Marlott and Gordon model, and then a section on self-care. Let's go into this book just a little more. I've already downloaded it, and let's see if I can actually, yeah, I'm interested in bread and bonsai too. Let's see if we can go there. All right. So this is the self-maintenance section, and although there's little thumbnails here you can scroll through, this is the iBook or EPUB format. Let me stretch this out a little more. I can scroll through here and show you a little better what's going on, I think. So this is self-management, and the perpetuating part is what we're really focusing on now. This is an alternative to the four-step approach. The perpetuation stage, as I explore in some detail here, is really important. But getting rid of excess baggage, being more efficient, is a great way to maintain self-management. In a way, keeping the amount of resources you need to devote to self-management at a more sustainable level. It's all about sustainability and being able to keep doing what works and not having to keep doing what doesn't. Making it a natural part of your life, which I think it is in many ways, otherwise you would have gotten as far as you have. Internalization is one part of it. Internalizing, fading from overt to covert, scheduling that. And you see here a graph describing how the target response might change as a result of different interventions, and then continuing the internalization. You can think of this as a different phase of self-management from self-change, self-maintain, if you will, if you want to do the verb thing, which I'm experimenting with this semester. But you could also talk about this as another intervention, which it technically is. Self-maintenance is a slow, gradual change to keep things moving, either trending in the same upward or downward direction, or to keep it flat, to keep your smoking and vaping totally ceased, to keep your regular exercise program nice and steady. despite all sorts of other demands on your life. Streamlining is different than internalizing, and I detail it there. To streamline is to figure out what different components or elements of the self management intervention really are working the best and are the lowest cost, require the fewest resources, not a monetary cost in almost all cases. So using a graph for this is something I advocate, as well as ratings. I've often advocated rating costs and benefits, and in fact, there's now in economics a unit called a WELLBE, where they similarly rate benefits and costs using a 10-point scale, interestingly. Kind of like what I've advocated here. But this was from, I wrote this in the early 80s, so I think I predated them, but that's okay. Great ideas sometimes evolve similarly, and certainly the WELLBE has been far more used in UK implementations. Okay, so these are like, the cost here would be, what are you willing to tolerate psychologically? Not just in terms of time, but more in terms of the hassle of it, the cognitive load, if you will, the psychological load or psychological cost. Really, how difficult is the phrase I often use. And then how satisfied were you with this strategy, or how beneficial was it? And I'm talking about each of these as different components of a self-intervention. These are different types of components, actually. But we don't have to get into that more meta approach there. But I explain here what you'll later see in the exercises, the concept behind psychological benefits. There's always some benefit to most things we do in self-management, but some just aren't doing that much for us, at least not that much anymore. I think we naturally streamline and dump those components that don't seem to give us that much, especially if they are particularly difficult or have a lot of psychological costs or just take a lot of time. But here I'm outlining a general rubric where you have a minimum level of benefit below which, like strategy G, part of intervention, self-management intervention component G, it's not giving me enough benefit, even if it's very low in cost here too. In this graph of benefits and costs, there can also be sort of a budget limit. Like, beyond this point, I don't want to do it. It's just too psychologically costly, or it takes too much time, or both. So this is sort of a cost constraint, and this is a outcome or benefit constraint. And then here I indicate the line where costs and benefits are equal. If you do both of these, let me go back here on, say, the same scale, 10-point scale, from not at all to extremely difficult or costly, and not at all to extremely beneficial or useful. This is what my high school geometry teacher used to call Equality Boulevard, where the benefits and costs are equal. And ideally, you want to stay above that boulevard, but also below this, it's not beneficial enough for me constraint, and you want to stay above this, it's too costly for me constraint. So really, you want to look here at components. Each of these is not as useful as I indicated in the text here. So relapse prevention. You may think this is the end of the reading, but hey, it's only page 8, so always keep scrolling. Here, I talk about relapse prevention, making a model of relapse so you don't. There's actually been some really interesting work on this that is identified for a variety of classic relapse areas. Marlon Gordon did this work a number of decades ago, but it's been used and verified since. Some common relapse antecedents: a high-risk situation. If you've relapsed back to smoking, or back to drinking, or back to a relationship you wanted to avoid, or back to almost anything, these may apply. At least it's a good first place to start. So the high-risk situation is detailed here, and then coping with it, ways to deal with that. Decreased self-esteem is often a next antecedent, and if you're in a high-risk situation but your self-esteem is good, it's usually fine. But if there is also decreased self-esteem, that can lead to other things, and these, like a set of dominoes, these can often collapse one into the other, and eventually with a abstinence violation effect, according to Marlott Gordon. Well, the readings here, I don't have to go into it that much in detail, but here's my inspirational attempt here, and a photo of a rare event here in DC, snow. Getting back to this. I also have here a more readable, pretty readable version of relapse prevention that involves much more, many more steps. This is 11 steps. And it also talks about how to use journaling. But in this, different phases or stages of relapse are detailed. These are from Terence Gorski and Marilyn Miller in their book, Counseling for Relapse Prevention. And thought I should provide them here because it was such a nice summary. Lots of examples here. I think you might find them useful. All right, going back if I can. After this, with the readings, then there's, of course, the usual exam. And then we get into the focus area, which I also would like to talk about a bit. And it has readings, other resources, and then an exam. Complete these both at least 48 hours before the final unit deadline, which is 5 p.m. DC time, Thursday, April 27th. April 27th. And going into here, you can see I've written a bunch of stuff. I'll let you read it. The chapter that I wrote, this is a chapter on jobs and careers. This is in a self-management text again. We'll go into that in just a bit. Then some articles on gig work, sort of part-time work, freelancing, we used to call it, or being a stringer if you're a journalist. But this is fairly common now, and it's certainly one way to begin, especially if you need a little side income or if you want to do this full-time. Some people do this their whole lives. Other people say, this is just sort of a side thing in addition to my full-time job. There is another phenomena of actually working multiple full-time jobs. I forget the term for that. It's a little edgy and not in a good way, in my opinion. More interesting is the 4-day work week, where instead of a usual 5-day work week for full-time employees, the 4-day work week, where they were paid the same but worked only 8 hours, 4 days a week, produced a surprising result, and I'll let you dig into that. I think you'll be surprised. Telework, this is before COVID, so it doesn't confound COVID and all of our anxiety and problems of COVID with telework. Very promising research there too. I'll get back to that in a moment. And then a video on a particular career that I know a lot about and some of you are interested in, but it's also an exemplary career and that it shows some surprises. It also shows how you can prepare, if you're careful, for this career. There's a website here that is very useful, and then some information here as well, showing where people who choose psychology as a career end up working. They're not all clinicians or professors, by the way. You'll be surprised. In fact, there's good money to be made as an employee with an MA or better, a PsyD or PhD in industrial organizational psychology, other areas of psychology. Let's go into these in a little more detail, do a little more of a tour here. So the book, let me get back to this if I can. Okay, and here's the focus area. All right. So, jobs and careers. Yes, it's a climbing wall. And I'll go into this in some detail. Here is a lot of writing on framing this for you. And then, yep, that's the Grand Canyon, by the way. This is a way to apply the activity analysis that we use beforehand to figure out what target responses to focus on in the self-study, using the same sort of analysis based on operations research, actually, to figure out which career to select given the resources you have. Now, by resources required, as you'll see here, I'm encouraging you to think about, we all have different mixes of the ingredients that'll make our careers, our jobs very successful. But knowing what those resources are with that honest self-appraisal, being able to accept, it's difficult. Certainly I found that one has some limitations, as well as, just wanted to make it a little larger, realizing that, hey, I am really smart, or I've gotten good grades, or I haven't gotten good grades, even though I'm really smart, etc. And whether you have the time in your schedule, your personal life. Some of us have lots of other things we're doing. Whether we're willing to travel or can travel frequently or relocate is part of that. All of these can figure in differently to a variety of careers. And this is a decision table or matrix you might find useful. And I go into that more in terms of career choice. I use an illustration of my decision to become a psychology professor and choose that as a career, which I will tell you got a lot of laughs when I first told one of my professors about it. And he was the cool one with the long curly hair. Um, but you can see that only, 46 years, okay, count grad school too. 50 years later, here I am, still doing it. Might be a career. I don't know. I'll have to go back and talk to him if he's still around. Okay, so things that can help. Getting volunteer experience is a great way to try out a lot of careers. I talk about the importance of doing that for both jobs and careers. And then I switch to the idea of getting a job, which ultimately, even if you have a career, most of us will not settle for just being able to say, I am a, or I have a career in. We actually want to get paid for it, whether it's by our own income through self employment or getting somebody else to pay us. Um, I haven't talked as much about entrepreneurship here, and that's more in the gigging part of the references, and self employment and running your own business, and that's another important area. I should really add a section on that into self management in the future. Let me know if you got some good resources on that. I have a few. And then talking about passing the interview, I have a link here you might want to follow up. Letters of recommendation, and then steps. And this is applying the basic step model of self-monitoring, self-analysis, self-change, self-maintenance. You know this, you've done this, to getting a job, starting a career. Yes, this is a nice little walk in Del Mar, California, just a little above San Diego, below LA. Here I talk about applying the steps model there, and I give some examples. Some instances from my own and other people's experiences, my friends, my students, self-analysis, self-intervention, or self-change, another word for self-change. And then I talk about group meetings. The job club, for example, is something you may do informally anyway, but there's actually some research on how this can really help. It's a bit like AA, but it's job A, only it's not anonymous. You help each other. The idea is to encourage each other, provide resources, share resources and opportunities, not leech off at each other, but actually help this all work better. The model is very interesting. It's worked well, and you could do this with some friends as well as do it online with a variety of strangers. I think if you search Job Club, you'll probably find a lot of possibilities. I talk about antecedents, continue to apply the psychological model of self-management to jobs and careers with self-statements. You might find these interesting. These are close approximations of what I've heard either in my own head or from others. Getting started on a career and a job, and I give a range of types of target responses you might consider. And move on. As you can see, we're talking about contingencies. Obviously, consequence control techniques could be applied here, reinforcement and punishment, using advisors and mentors, not as people who will do the work for you or the people who are the gatekeepers, although sometimes they are, but instead as consultants, free or otherwise, who will help you through the process. And then I give a case illustration. I realize this does not apply to a whole lot of people, but it does illustrate a number of interesting things about careers, getting jobs. And this is careers in psychology. I give some active links here in the red. I don't know why the software used red, but there they do. And I talk about deciding and looking at the different areas of psychology. Most professions, whether it's philosophy, business, law, have many sub-professions. You might be surprised to know how much there is, for example, in psychology. I may not have known there was anything but clinical psychology aside from academia, but there's experimental, which involves a whole lot of areas, including psychology of aging or lifespan psychology, or you could call it gerontological psychology. There's certainly neuroscience, pharmacological, personality, social, so much. Forensic psych, which you might be really interested in if you study the law and criminal justice. Industrial organizational psych pays particularly well. Health psychology, which some of you have taken a course in from me or from others, and there's a lot more. So I think you'll find this relevant if you're interested in health studies, health promotion, business, so much else. Here's the decision matrix, the activity analysis, resources required again for different types of careers. And I try to illustrate my earlier concept. This is for different areas of psychology, though, as you can see here. And applying that, trying to make decisions within that. Another link you might find interesting. This is from our very own Department of Psychology blog. Thank you, Dr. Laura Duval, for almost all these postings. A few are from me, although they are from our course, but not indicated as such. A number of alternative setting goals, things to do. I realize you might be in the last semester of your senior year as you're reading this, but some of you aren't, and this at least illustrates the idea, the plan. And the difference between clinical psych and PsyD and psychiatric social work, different ways of getting that degree you wanted. Maybe you were focused on medical school, but maybe you decided OChem and PChem were not for you, therefore you looked in other health professions or despaired of going into health care professions. But there's so many other ways to be involved in healthcare. Just like not everyone's able to get a degree in clinical psychology. It's pretty exclusive, actually. Psychiatric social work will actually get you out earlier. And there's similar things in being a physician's assistant, being a physical therapist, being a nurse of different sorts. Each career has sort of a penultimate position that's because of power structure and a lot of other factors is limited to just a few people, but there's many other ways to participate and have a career in healthcare, have a career in mental health services, have a career in education. Okay, so I'll give you a little plan here, a form for planning your studies, and then here I give a timeline to illustrate applying for graduate programs. You could use this certainly for any area, law, business, where you're pursuing a master's degree like an MBA or a degree of jurisprudence, I believe, or a medical degree or a clinical PhD. And there's a variety of these activities in this indicated in this chart and where they might fall between your freshman and sophomore year, junior, and your senior year. Notice how I break out the years in much more detail as we get toward the end, because that's where a lot of specific plans need to happen. Some concrete goals for trying on careers and internships, letters of recommendation, a variety of additional links. And if you're interested in clinical psych or other areas related to that, certainly there's a lot of possibilities out there. All right, I've gone over this in a lot of detail. I realize I'll go a little quicker through the rest. This article is real interesting in terms of being an entrepreneur or being self-employed. Gives you more freedom. Working in a gig economy. This is from your very own U.S. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, if you're a U.S. citizen. Otherwise, it's still free. And this talks about gig workers, everybody from people working bands to people doing, well, it shows you the sort of breakdown, doesn't it? And how the industry has grown. There's pros and cons that are described here. I think they continue to work. And then some practical strategies on how to get these different part-time employment, self-employment opportunities. There's developments in the United Kingdom that I think are interesting and give you an idea of what's available there too. This is a fairly short, easy to follow article, I think, with a prior Prime Minister, I believe. Anyway, it is, I think, worthwhile to consider this. And it shows how universal gig economy is. It's certainly not limited to just the U.S. Thank goodness. All right, moving on. There's some other developments here to consider. The 4-day work week. This is New York Times, but I've already downloaded the whole article as a PDF. So this does not require, none of the readings in this course should require a subscription. And here you have the PDF provided copy. This is some research that was done in New Zealand, but more comprehensive approach has been pursued. And the very similar findings, actually more positive findings. So I'll let you read that on your own. And some telework. The research there is also quite promising. This is from another association tied up related to psychology. This is APS, the Association for Psychological Science. It's more research focused, less clinical in its focus, although it certainly talks about clinical applications. And this is a great society, just like American Psychological Association. This one has somewhat lower dues, a little more academically oriented. Notice they tag this to industrial organizational psych, which is kind of interesting, as well as work-life balance. These you can locate and use. This is free. I'm not a member. This is accessible without logging in. No subscription needed. I think and I just accessed it, so it's current. I think you'll find this interesting, as well as short and sweet. But the research here, read up on it. Okay, applying to grad school in clinical psych. There's a website and a video here. The video is really good and free and accessible. Let's see. Sorry about these ads. Oh, yeah, okay. Loving it. I'm really upset with this. Sorry. Okay, more here. And there's more. I think you'll find that interesting. Thank you, Liz. Glad you liked it. And you can see it goes on. It's about 20, almost 25 minutes, but it's worthwhile. Check it out and listen carefully. There's a lot of good information here that's generalizable to a lot of careers. And this discusses the difference between a clinical PhD and a PsyD in particular. You'll find in law and medicine there are similar distinctions between a more applied and which is the PsyD here, and a more generalist degree, the PhD in this case. Although the clinical PhD you think is specialized enough, but no. Let's see, I think we're getting toward the end. Yeah, maybe. Okay, I'll go over here. The website is also useful, I think. If you have read much in the area or inquired elsewhere, it's really important to get research experience. And there's a variety of links here, as well as a variety of other considerations. CudCup is a real interesting resource you can access here, whether you are director of a clinical training program or not. So do check that out. You'll find similar associations and links for business and law and medicine and other health studies. And finally, where do people get work? At different areas of different times in their career, early, mid, senior, late, all stages overall. And you can see that private practice is where a number of psychologists do work, but a number also work in hospitals, a variety of other organized human services, universities, for-year colleges, other educational settings. Universities offer graduate degrees, like American University. We have a lot of master's degrees, and I think we have at least 8 PhDs across the university in a variety of areas, from international studies to, and I think the School of Public Affairs offers a PhD, and certainly in psychology, clinical psych in particular, and then also behavior cognition and neuroscience, which is sort of interdisciplinary psychology degree. Some work in business, some work in government, other educational settings, and a variety of other settings too. So there's psychologists work in so many different places. Anyway, this is something to find out as you begin your graduate studies, you begin your career pursuit, to figure out where people actually work, because your ideas of where they work may be totally off. They're determined a lot by media and the rest, I think. And things are different out there in the real world. Talking to people who do this can really help too, of course. All right, I think that's it for now. That's more than you may have wanted, but I wanted to give a thorough introduction to this if you wanted to pursue it. This self-maintenance section. I'm not talking about a career in psychology, just self-maintenance. Don't forget the discussion area. There's a variety of topics here, but you can really bring in any topic that you want to discuss. These topics include separating work life from home life. It's a real interesting thing in evaluation, which is another profession, very interdisciplinary, not related to psychology per se or education or sociology, but often combinations of those and so many other things. I really enjoy how interdisciplinary it is, and balancing work and home life. Man, a lot to read here, and many other sources. Okay, folks, that's all for now. Sorry it went so long.